Republic of Palau consists of 8 principal islands and about 300 smaller ones lying on a ridge at the edge of the 7,000 metre deep Palau Yap Trench, some 800 kilometres southeast of the Philippines. The northern larger islands are volcanic in origin, and the southern group consists of a flooded karst system of limestone islets formed after the last ice age. With a population of around 20,000, the economy relies mainly on tourism and a compact with the United States, which provides financing for infrastructure in exchange for strategic access to the area. Apart from historical World War II locations, scuba is the main tourist attraction and considered by many to be of world class in all respects. The main dive sites are on the western edge of the lagoon, and all diving is carried out from fast boats which transport clients from the main town of Koror to the reef edge. There are few dive sites within the shallow lagoon, but the islands provide an exciting backdrop as the skippers complete the 50-minute ride to the drop-off on the edge of the lagoon. The islands also provide calm water and shelter for the journey, as at times the water can get a little rough crossing the lagoon to the open sea. Drift diving along the face of steeply sloping reefs is the standard practice for Palau. The lagoon drop-off, where it protects the islands from the open sea to the west, falls quickly to several hundred feet and provides kilometres of pristine reef to explore. Large sea fans are a common sight, usually adorned with different coloured feather stars, which photographers and videographers alike felt compelled to record at each encounter. Strangely, few fish, either reef-dwelling or pelagic, were seen on the reef faces during these dives, but that may have been as a consequence of visiting the base in the off-season, if there is such a thing. It was here, though, that some of the largest stands of pink whip corals I have ever seen reach out into the current, feeding on the microorganisms it provides. The experience on the shallower reefs was, however, entirely different. Schools of tropical fish meandered amongst the varied corals, seemingly unperturbed by the presence of divers, and seemed quite happy to join them in a leisurely swim along the reef's edge. there were always the ubiquitous clownfish and anemones to capture the diver's attention. In several locations along the reef, a sandy shelf, dotted with coral outcrops, had formed before it dropped off into deeper water. It was here that larger reef inhabitants could be observed patrolling the edge. Coral outcrops also served as cleaning stations for manta ray, and if you waited patiently nearby, you could observe them approaching, looking for the cleaner wrasse residing inside. Manta are quite curious animals, and the jangling of a metal clip soon had them investigating the sounds. On the first few attempts, they appeared a little hesitant and resumed their overhead observations. Eventually, one overcame its caution and inspected the divers more closely. Any dive location without a wreck is, in my opinion, not worthy of the name, so I was delighted to find a couple of them on the agenda. Sunk during World War II, this vessel, the Huffer Adai, lay close to Karor Main Harbour, so consequently the visibility was slightly reduced. Having lain here for close on 77 years, it was in an advanced state of corrosion and very silty, so the advice from the dive leader was not to consider any penetration. At least one diver had perished in the attempt already. However, the wreck did not disappoint, as the man-made angles of the structure had been softened by years of marine growth and provided plenty of opportunities for photographers and videographers alike. Apart from the usual wreck residents, like these lionfish found lurking around the entrance to the bridge area, I was surprised to find a lifeboat still attached to the vessel. Surprisingly, when asked, about 50% of the dive team didn't see it, but I thought it made a nice foreground subject to an exploring diver. One of the most anticipated dives was situated at the deepest and most vertical drop-off of the outer reef. Located where a large natural cleft is formed in the cliff face, it is known as Blue Corner and is reputed to be one of the top 10 dives in the world. The upwelling current brings nutrients to the surface, and large schools of fish congregate here as a consequence. This in turn brings predators which prey on the outer fringes of the schools. The divers are live dropped from a boat some distance off the reef face and swim to the outermost point of the site, where they hook themselves in with a reef hook and float in the rising current to observe the action. The predators mostly ignore the divers and patrol the fringes of their potential meal. Occasionally, one will come in closer and take a curious glide past the divers, its unblinking eye recording the details of each in turn as it passes by. wasn't until its second pass that I noticed something particular about it. One pectoral fin was badly bent and damaged, and at certain angles a curved group of scars could be seen on its body. I thought that possibly it had survived an attack by some much larger predator at some time in the not too distant past. Another frequent visitor during the dive was a curious Maori wrasse, which was prone to swing up behind the anchored divers as if to see what they were looking at. Dive time expended, all that was necessary was to release the reef picks and allow the current to carry us back over the reef to the waiting boat. Of all the sights of the Palau experience, the Cathedral Cave for me was the most memorable. The entrance to the complex, not a stone's throw from the main harbour area, was unremarkable to say the least, and although the visibility outside the entrance was poor, as soon as we passed through the portal, a new world of clarity presented itself. The islands of South Palau are the remains of a flooded karst system, which has been formed over millennia by rain and surface water eroding a large plateau of porous limestone, forming channels above ground as well as underground caves and river systems. At one time above sea level, the porous nature of the rock allowed water to seep through, dissolving minerals along the way to form calcium bicarbonate, which, when it came into contact with air and dripped from the ceiling of a cave, formed deposits of calcium carbonate, which eventually grew into the stalactites we see today. Several thousand years ago, these caves also formed shelter for the earliest settlers of the Palauan archipelago, and it is only recently that archaeologists have begun to piece together the early history of the area by excavating the floors of several caves which are still above sea level and were used as living areas or burial sites. Eventually, at the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose and the plateau was flooded, leaving the remaining higher limestone hills to form the islands we see today. For the tourist diver, however, such detail was irrelevant, as the spectacle Cathedral Cave presented was one of calm, peace and tranquility.
And then guys, if you look over there, you can still see a small path leading up the limestone. There's actually a fifth air chamber. I've never been inside, but Sharon apparently has. Share your experiences.
Everybody keep it here, let's go. Nah guys, it's really cool inside, like I said earlier. But yeah. Unfortunately, I think maybe only the girls can go.
The average depth of the dive didn't exceed 15 metres or so, but the unfamiliar structures, the silence and clarity of the water left you feeling as if you were diving in space or exploring some alien world. On the return journey, we just dropped down to mid-water, turned off our lights and followed the ever-widening pool of light to the entrance and safety beyond. Cathedral Cave, a fitting finale to a great dive trip.